I'm Stephen Staley. This is my son Jack. We're from Goshen, Utah, and this is Oxford in America.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Oxford in America. We're heading to two states in this episode, Arizona and Utah. Arizona is the home of the Grand Canyon, and Utah is the home of some spectacular scenery and our new friend, Stephen Staley. So let's get started and head right out to Arizona. One of the major destinations we wanted to get to with this trip was a big piece of America, the Grand Canyon. Something very unique to crossing the United States. Every cross-country trip has to have a stop at the Grand Canyon. And we really didn't want to do the normal touristy stop. We didn't want to stop with a tour bus and a bunch of blue hairs and some velvet ropes and the sidewalks. That wasn't our style, and it's not Oxford style either. We really wanted to kind of get a cross-country overland trip. And so with some tips from some friends, we found this campsite on the northern rim of the Grand Canyon. And the only way to get to it was just to strike out across the desert.
It was a 90-mile ride in. We didn't see another vehicle all day long. It was quite an adventure. I mean, it was four-wheel drive, low range.
Yeah, and to say that again, 90 miles, four-wheel drive, low range. So it was all day, and it was a rough drive in across the desert. Our trip started out by leaving Nevada and entering a new state, Arizona. It was there that we left the hard surface road and started to make our way out into the desert. But it wasn't all desert driving. We did make our way into some hills and where we found some woodland cover and were joined by some of our forest friends. As we exited the forest, we came into a place that is called Mount Trumbull. This now abandoned area was once the host of several farming families, with a peak population of just over 100 people in the early 1920s. This replica of the original one-room schoolhouse stands as a monument to the area's once inhabitants. We were also able to replicate in some small way an image from the original Far Eastern expedition. Here, Oxford is parked next to a signpost directing us to the Grand Canyon. After another hour or so of driving, we came upon it, the Grand Canyon. We parked up Oxford and walked over the edge to have a look. We just sat there. No words, no pictures can capture the moment. The sun on the rocks, the wind in the canyon, the sounds of the Colorado River below. It's all almost like religion for the non-believer. After long moments of gazing into the canyon and pondering things like the meaning of life or what's for dinner, we retreated back a ways from the canyon edge and set up our camp. We had a little campsite close by, about a half or quarter mile back off the canyon was our campsite. We sat there, had a nice camp for the night. I remember we got to see some night skies. Now, the Grand Canyon, we're 3 states off the coast now, off the west coast. And we were just coming to the edge of the impacts of the forest fires.
And Grand Canyon is known for the night sky. It's one of the best star watching places in the United States, except
We were still having a lot of smoke in the atmosphere from the fires on the West Coast. We were kind of right there on the edge. If you looked to the east, you could see some night sky. If you looked to the west, you couldn't see anything but the smoke. But we were able to do a little stargazing.
Right.
We saw a few satellites.
saw a few, yep.
And saw a couple of the stars and the planets, and had a nice night there.
The next morning, we were up with the sun to capture the obligatory sunrise over the canyon. And I have to say, it was well worth the missed sleep.
That was a big moment. It was a high moment for the trip for us.
For me, it was definitely one of the high moments.
I've never seen the Grand Canyon before.
No,
and seeing it in person like that, au naturel, if you will, all thanks to Oxford, making that long trip across the desert.
And Oxford performed flawlessly through that whole trip.
Yeah.
We packed up Oxford for another day's long journey out of the desert. But first, Oxford worked up a powerful thirst crossing the desert, and she was desperate for a top-up. This was one of the few times we actually dipped into gin and tonic to supplement our fuel supply. All fueled up, it was time to head back out for our next destination. Leaving Arizona, the next leg of the journey took us into Utah, where we were able to meet up with Stephen Stahaley and his family. Stephen contacted us while we were making the journey and decided to meet up with us and share the drive for the day in his old Series Land Rover.
My Series Land Rover, my 88-inch one, I've had it since 1998. It came out of Colorado. It was originally a Colorado truck. I've never really done much to it other than just maintained it. It's fairly stock. The family that I bought it from in Colorado had it for a lot of years before that. In fact, so it's always kind of been a Colorado Western United States truck.
Before we got started for the day, Mike needed to perform a small bit of maintenance to tighten up a rattling exhaust clamp. Seeing Mike under the Oxford inspired Stephen to perform a little under Oxford work himself.
It was one of those, a lot of years ago, I bought an old copy of Oxford to London, the book, the trip that they took. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be awesome to have the gentleman that took that trip actually sign the book? Well, there's not a lot of chance I'll probably ever meet those gentlemen. But I thought, if I'm going to see the vehicle that went on that, why wouldn't I have it sign the book? So I brought that book along. And I thought, what a better way to have it sign it was to have a drip of oil on it. We all know that old Land Rovers they're going to have a drip of oil somewhere on it. So we crawled up underneath it, took a drop of oil it was coming off the gearbox there, and just dabbed it in the title page of the old book that I have, and then closed it up. But I didn't look at it for a couple of weeks, and it was kind of funny how it soaked through so many pages, and it actually faded. Didn't leave as big of a mark as I thought it would, but it is kind of a fun memento to have that the Oxford signed my copy of the book.
With that bit of silliness behind us, Stephen started us off on the day's drive by heading up some winding roads to climb up Parker Mountain. While the road started off well enough, it soon gave way to rougher terrain and steeper climbs. This was Oxford's second exposure to the higher elevations in America. Before long, we topped out into the high plains. With the wide open spaces and the scarce landmarks to orient yourself, we needed to stop a few times to make sure we were on the right path. At the peak, we were at 9,200 feet, or about 2,800 meters. Here, Stephen straightened us all out.
We're currently right here on Parker Mountain. Between Boulder Mountain would be this way, Thousand Lake Mountain would be this way, and Capitol Reef is that way. We have just come from Otter Creek over the mountain this way.
From there, we struck out across the plains and descended back down to the hard surface roads. Where Oxford was once again holding up traffic. Eventually, we arrived in the small town of Loa. There, to our surprise, was a double-decker bus. The double-decker drive-in offered a mix of an English-themed setting, Hawaiian decor, and traditional American fare. This eclectic little spot even had a road sign to help us along, and we double-checked it, and it was correct. We were just shy of 5,000 miles from London. After a quick top-off for both us and the Rovers, we headed back out on the road to Capitol Reef National Park. Capitol Reef National Park gets its name from having a line of several brightly colored white rocky domes that are said to be similar in appearance to the Capitol Dome of the United States Capitol building. What we particularly enjoyed was the spectacular views of miles of cliffs of brightly colored and contrasting sandstone. Leaving the park, the roads began to get a little smaller. And a little smaller still. And finally, downright desolate. But we did have some company in the form of a small herd of pronghorn. The pronghorn is indigenous to the plains of the American Southwest, and, oddly enough, it's the fastest land mammal in the Western Hemisphere. With the pronghorn's quarter-mile speeds estimated to be just under 60 miles an hour, we did not feel that Oxford was up to the challenge of a race. We said goodbye to the pronghorn and pushed further along on our journey. It was an almost perfect day of two old rovers trundling across Utah until the very end. Stephen's rover started to run rough and cut off on us. Luckily, Mike was able to spend a few moments under the hood whispering some dark incantation to the carburetor that was good enough to keep things moving so that we both made it to our final destination.
Well, that wraps things up for this episode. In our next episode, we'll visit Moab, Utah, America's off-road playground. We'll see you next time on Oxford in America.